In this video, I'm going to teach you how to answer Oracle's top 10 interview questions. Question number 1, why Oracle? Okay, and the number one thing you should keep in mind here is that everyone compliments the company that they're applying for. Okay, and if you put yourself in the interviewer's shoes, you hear this over and over and over again. It's impossible for you to differentiate candidates based on this question, right? So if you so wish to differentiate yourself from others in a job interview and make the difference, bias the interviewer towards you, you should come up with something that's more interesting, more memorable, something that's genuine about yourself. Everyone applies for jobs because they're also looking for the money, but if you want to go a slightly peculiar way, the most interesting I've heard as of recently would be something on the lines of, you know what, I'm not sure I want to join you just yet. I'm here to learn more about the opportunity and whether my skills can add value to what you do. All right, so this could be also an approach for you to consider when answering why Oracle. Okay, question number 2, tell me about your most recent invention. Okay, and if I may just translate this question to you, tell me about what's your most recent invention. What is the best invention you can talk about for this job interview? Okay, it doesn't have to be the most recent. Okay, it must be something memorable, something impressive about yourself, something that you hopefully bias the interviewer towards you and get the job. Okay. Also, maybe interesting to note here, tell me about your most recent invention is a behavioral question, right? So tell me about a time when. They are looking for your past experiences so they can predict your future performance on the job. So when you're talking about an invention, it should be something that makes sense for the role that you're applying for, right? The context should be pretty obvious. It would be related to your subject matter expertise as well, right? Also, maybe useful to know that behavioral interviews, behavioral questions are best answered in the STAR format, at least for beginners, right? If you're applying for an executive role, you could there are other ways you could go around this, but the basics would be around the STAR format. Okay. Question number 3: if there's something you wish you'd improve on, what would it be? Right. So why would someone ask you this in a job interview? Okay, it's still a behavioral question if you want, but this translates to what's your weakness. Okay, so how would you go answering about your weakness? There's various ways, okay? So executive roles could take a bit more risk and, maybe in some job descriptions, there's some elephant in the room. There's something you have no chance knowing, you're not good at that one thing from the job description. And this would be one exceptional opportunity for you to explain yourself around that and to basically pitch that weakness from the job description, address the elephant in the room, and basically put this to your advantage as much as possible, right? The most generic weakness for the past decade or so would be public speaking. The worst weakness I've heard as of recently would be interviewing skills. You cannot interview well. All right, but regardless of all this, the best way you could pitch a weakness would be with a great story. Okay, so if you prepare a story around that weakness to show how you can improve, how you can ramp up your expertise there, that's one of the best ways to sell yourself on a weakness. Right. Next question: tell me about the time when you refused to compromise your standards. Okay, so I believe the reason why someone would ask you this in a job interview is pretty clear: to test your high standards, right? Now, the challenge is that high standards mean different things to different people, right? So there are some software engineers for whom high standards just simply means fixing bugs if they occur, right? For others, for higher quality, preventing bugs, or even, having some innovation, some innovative approaches to relentlessly work on improving your standards. Okay, so the basic question is, what is high standards with respect to your specific role? And of course, then think about the time when you made a difference, when you exhibited relentlessly high standards. Usually people don't have significant challenges answering this interview question so long they prepare it in advance, right? Still a behavioral question. Next question, tell me about a recent conflict which you had with your manager or peer. Okay, these questions are to test one's interpersonal skills for a job interview. And I believe the best way to explain why these types of questions around conflict are important to master is to explain to you what type of mistakes people do the most. Number one most common mistake here would be to put the blame on someone. So time when you had an argument with a disagreement with a peer, they were wrong, I told them they're wrong, it was their fault, but they never listened. Okay, so this type of approach. And in my experience, it does happen more often than people realize, because it's easier than you realize to put the blame on someone or on a peer, on your manager, or even on your previous company. It's really easy, especially if you don't prepare these things in advance. Okay, what you want to exhibit with these questions around conflict is your ability to earn people's trust. Okay, so for instance, if you had a conflict with your manager, okay, they were having one point of view, had a different point of view, maybe you came up with some data, maybe if you are an executive, you commissioned a study to prove your point, and maybe you were eventually right. Okay, or a more peculiar way you could go around this would be a time when you had a disagreement with your boss, but in spite of the disagreement, you committed to their decision and it proved to be the right course of action. Could be a perfectly fine example. What you want to stay away from is a time when you had a disagreement with your manager, when you knew they were wrong, but you had to go with the flow, and then they eventually said, haha, you see, you were wrong. Okay, so this example does not play to your advantage as a candidate in a job interview. You don't sell yourself on anything interesting here, right? So this would be around interpersonal skills, quite common interview questions. You should definitely take this seriously. Next one, tell me about your worst failure. Okay, so to translate this, tell me about the time when you failed. Okay, this is one of the trickier types of behavioral questions to answer in job interviews, simply because people have a hard time talking about failure. And I would challenge you even right now to think about the failure, and I predict that it will take you 3 attempts for you to find the proper failure story. Okay, so this would be the first reason why this question comes up in job interviews. The second reason, also super important, would be that they want not only for you to talk about the failure, but also, more importantly, what you learned from that failure. And I would even suggest you spend half of your answer talking about your learnings from that failure, right? On the other hand, you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot talking about how you got fired from a previous role 3 months ago because you did a monumental mistake, right? This would be a bit dangerous, to use for a job interview, right? Next one, tell me about the time when you were 75% through a project, program, or initiative and had to pivot in order to ensure its successful completion. Okay, so 75% through the project, you got stuck. What did you do to ensure successful completion? And the reason why some candidates struggle answering these questions, because they literally think that the key here is to think of a project where exactly 75% through it, not 70, not 80, 75% through it, you got stuck or there were problems. When in reality, the reason why this question gets asked is to see on whether you can get unstuck from a complex situation, and eventually your ability to deliver on that project, program, or initiative, right? It could be 50%, more closer to 50% to that program if you want, but the main thing here is to think about the time when your subject matter expertise or your problem solving skills played an essential role to get the project unstuck and to deliver on some amazing results. Okay, results means different things to different types of roles. As you'd imagine, a developer must develop some code to deliver some code on time. If you go higher up, then it comes in sprints, and then you could also talk about some sales funnels here and whatnot. So you understand the point, but the bread and butter of this to understand is that the time when you got stuck to a project and you got unstuck, your subject matter expertise, again, your problem solving skills play the key role in this circumstance. Again, a behavioral question in the STAR format, right? Next one. Can you explain a complex technical concept to a non-technical audience? Okay, and this can of course come in many different types of flavors. It doesn't always have to be really that, I mean, technical concepts mean different things to different people. For a salesperson, a sales funnel is something technical, right? For a PM, maybe explaining what an agile method is a technicality. But long story short, I believe it's an interesting exercise for you to think of some concepts, whatever is technical, whatever you call technical to your role. Maybe it could be also an interesting metric for some executive types of roles, and try to explain that to someone who's non-technical. Try to teach someone something interesting during the job interview. I found that these questions are surprisingly common, and I also found that the significant indicator of a high-performing candidate in my coaching session is someone from whom I learn something interesting. Okay, so this is why I believe this question, can you explain a complex technical concept to a non-technical audience, makes a ton of sense as an exercise for you to prepare for a job interview, right? Next one, how do you stay current with industry trends and technological advancements? Okay, how do you stay inspired and learn new things? How do you learn? Are you a lifelong learner? How do you prove that? Okay, what is a question sign here? If someone answers these questions of how do you learn, I have that one guy whom I'm subscribed to YouTube for over 10 years, and I listen to them every single day, right? So learning from only one source is an indication that maybe that person isn't really a lifelong learner, but rather, they learn they learn from one source at most, right? So you must have a broader, a diverse, a broad area from which you learn, right? You maybe attend some conferences. Even better if you are a forward-thinking individual, and you can also prove this somehow. But learning from multiple sources is key here. And talking about technological advancement, some people also some scientists, I remember they came up with some predictions they had around what would be the most interesting technological advancement relating to their area of expertise, machine learning in that case, and they give me some interesting pitches here. But needless to say, the moment you know the question and you prepare it in advance, you get many pointers on how to best answer it. All right. Next one, how do you prioritize tasks when managing multiple projects or deadlines? Okay, so how do you prioritize in general? And these questions around prioritization, I like to put them in a larger basket of dealing with ambiguous situations. So regardless of the role that you're applying for, you will encounter ambiguous situations. So what is ambiguity to your role? And more often than not, when you have to deal with an ambiguous situation, you must do some sort of prioritization somehow, right? So I believe this question of how do you prioritize tasks when managing multiple projects or deadlines could also be framed such as how do you handle ambiguous situations, all right? And this is, of course, a behavioral question. You'd want to talk about a specific situation when you dealt with an ambiguous situation or prioritization successfully, okay? And what sells best to answer these questions, specifically on prioritization, is to use frameworks if you can. What is some interesting prioritization framework for your specific role? Like an example of a prioritization framework would be Jeff Bezos' type 1 and type 2 decisions. So type 1 decisions are easily reversible. They don't need a lot of thinking, so you could take risk. For example, if someone asks you for a general estimation of a project timeline, and they say, hey, it's nothing you don't have to be precise, I just need a ballpark figure on this. You could eventually spend a bit of time, come up with that estimation, knowing that you can change your mind later on. This will be type 1 decision, whereas type 2 decisions are the more complex types of decisions which are not reversible, or at least not easily reversible, right? Such as when you design your house, if you designed with 3 rooms, it's not gonna be straightforward if you want to further divide those into 5 rooms, or to change that number. Or more interesting, maybe if you decide a wisdom tooth extraction, that's not an easily reversible. I mean, you cannot make an implant to put your wisdom tooth back, right? So these were the type 2 decisions. But long story short, how do you prioritize these types of questions is dealing with ambiguity, and answering them with frameworks is one of the more efficient ways to score best in these interviews. So these are my top 10 questions in interview with Oracle. I hope you found this useful, and thank you very much for watching.